Go ahead. I can. Yeah. Okay. So my research was a doctoral study, and it was to look at how children and young people in Ireland experience the process of their parents' separation and divorce, and importantly, subsequent changed family life. And my aim was to give recognition to children's experiences. As Andrew has said, I've worked for nearly 20 years as a family mediator. I've engaged with children through the mediation process, and that engagement with children, I suppose, showed me that there was a mismatch at times between parents' perception of how their children were experiencing their separation and the children's perception, with parents perhaps understandably underplaying the impact that their actions might have on their children. So it was a result of that experience that I felt it was important to, I suppose, step back from my role as a mediator and to actually find out exactly what was happening for children and young people. It was a qualitative study embedded in the new sociology of childhood and the Convention on the Rights of the Child, using participatory methods. And I suppose both the new sociology of childhood and the Convention on the Rights of the Child, with both of those, you cannot escape taking a participatory approach. Okay? I use narrative inquiry for data gathering and for analysis. So the principles of participation of the convention, and also the use of Gerson Lansdown's degrees of participation, incorporating Lundy's conceptualization of Article 12 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Now, Lansdown's degrees of participation run across 3 sections, and when I started the PhD, I had no idea how participatory it might become. I wanted it to become participatory, but I didn't quite know how that would develop, because I suppose you're engaging with people who are considered to be vulnerable, and there's a great deal of care that needs to be taken about how that engagement happens, and whether I suppose the degree of participation has got to be in some way led by the participants themselves. But Lansdowne describes consultative participation, and she's speaking in the context of children's participation, not just in research, but in practice and in school councils, etc., etc. Adults seek children's views in order to build knowledge and understanding of their lives, and they recognise the value of the child's perspective. Collaborative participation then provides for a greater degree of participation with an opportunity for active engagement, so with children influencing both the process and the outcome. And child-led participation allows children and young people to identify issues of concern and to initiate action with adults as facilitators, not as leaders. And through the process of the research that I undertook, we moved from, I suppose we started off as a little bit more than consultative, maybe tending towards collaborative, but it certainly, the end result led to a child-led participation, which I'll talk about in a moment. Lundy's conceptualisation of Article 12 for children's participation involves 4 elements, and I think that this could very much transfer to all kinds of participation, including participation of adults and patients in research. The 4 elements are space, voice, audience and influence. Now, Article 12 of the United Nations Convention of the Rights of the Child is probably the most contested one, in that it's I suppose in other ways it can be used as the most powerful one from children's point of view. But in order to engage with those 4 elements, there's a need to incorporate other articles of the Convention: Article 2, Article 3, Article 5, Article 13 and Article 19. Space and voice, the provision of space, opportunity for involvement, a safe space, which Article 19 recommends, where children can express their views, Article 12, or be free not to, okay? That's another important. Article 12 is a right, it's not a duty. The voice, a right afforded to all people, present in a range of human rights. The right afforded to all people, and it's present in a range of human rights, a number of human rights instruments. But in Article 12, it specifies that this right to a voice should be offered to all children capable of forming his or her views. And this has been replaced at times, and that's where the complexity of Article 12 comes in. This has been replaced at times with an assumption of capacity and led to misconceptions about being dependent on age of maturity. Age of maturity applies just to the second part of Article 12. Children may need to be supported to form a view that's under Article 12 and be given an opportunity to express their views either orally, in writing, in art form or in other media. So there's not a presumption that in order to take note of Article 12 that you just go in and sit down with the child and ask them what they think about A, B or C. You really need to engage at a level that works with the child's with the child's capacity, but also in a way that ensures that they have an opportunity to engage in a way that they might want to. Audience then. Article 12 requires that views given by children are given due weight. So therefore, children and young people have a right to have their views listened to by decision makers. And I suppose that's where children and young people have criticised. You know, we were asked to do this research, but what happened afterwards? We never heard, we didn't hear, we spent time, etc. And that's true right across the board, not just for children and young people. So adults need training in active listening, and children need to be given an opportunity to express their views in a variety of ways, which is articulated in Article 13. Due weight in accordance with age of maturity. Listening may be easy. Giving due weight requires real challenge. This provision adds complexity to Article 12, as adults' conception of capacity and maturity may differ from what children's is, but also may differ across different adults. Okay, so under Article 5, it's important to provide support for the evolving capacity of the child. Okay, so from the outset, I included a two young person advisory group who worked with me from ethical approval stage. During that time, these two young people, one of them was a 17-year-old boy and the other was a 13-year-old girl. And they reviewed all my materials, posters, and made some very interesting comments on posters that I was going to be using in order to recruit participations, information packs, in interview schedule, and provided very invaluable insights into what was important for young people to see in those kind of materials, rather than what I, in my adult way, thought. And a good example of that, I had a poster that I prepared in order to recruit participants, and I had highlighted on that poster that I had ethical approval and that parental and child consent would be needed in order to participate in this research. And further down the poster, I had in smaller section that I was a mature and caring person. Those two young people separately told me to highlight the mature and caring person rather than ethical approval, because they said kids don't care about that. They want to know that you're going to engage in a caring way. Okay? So the actual research itself involved 14 children and young people. They were recruited from across the country, mainly through press release, which was surprising as well, because I had expected that my recruitment would come through service providers. And a number of children and young people made direct contact, having seen something in the newspaper, which again was interesting and unexpected. And that, I suppose, brings up the question of gatekeepers, because with all of those young people, because they were under 18 years of age, parental consent had to be given, and sometimes again parents or service providers felt that children whose parents had separated were too vulnerable to take part in research, and a number of possible participants were lost because of that, and I suspect that they were lost without ever having been asked if they would like to participate in the research. The children and young people ranged in age from 7 to 19 years, and there were 9 girls and 5 boys. And that was purely by chance because of family composition. They came from 9 families overall. So the initial process was that I had a one-on-one interview with each participant. Those interviews usually took place in the children's homes, and that was by their choice, because I offered some options around that. I had access to family resource centres, for example. I had access to a room in the Child and Family Research Centre, but most children and their parents opted that the research would take place in their homes. And again, that's an interesting experience. It has advantages and disadvantages. I think the main advantage is that you're on the young person's turf, so that you're a guest in their home and in their parents' home, and I think that sets up a certain diminishing of maybe power relations between the researcher and the child themselves, because you obviously need to respect the boundaries of the home. The disadvantage I found with it, or the challenge I found with it, was that I was conscious perhaps of taking up people's space in their home for a period of time, and there were a couple of one example where I became very conscious that a child's stepfather had come home from work. I was still in the kitchen. I'm sure kind of had this sense this man needs to have his dinner, and here am I taking up space in the kitchen, etc., etc. So kind of found myself maybe rushing through things a little bit because of that. Okay. I used a narrative, interactive, dialogical approach with all of the interviews. I shared information about myself, why I was interested in doing this work, some personal information as well as professional information. Used a kind of a getting to know you, talking cards exercise, so that we found out things about each other. A bear cards exercise that would help the children and young people to identify emotions, and family sculpture figures to measure whom they felt closest to in their family with each participant. And at the end of each interview, again with a parent present, I invited all participants, if they wished, to continue their involvement. And this is the bit that I know that Edel wanted me to focus on here, was how that involvement was achieved. So the keeping in touch. I wrote to everybody after each interview and thanked them for their participation, and again said, should you wish to, I'll be in touch with you again if you want to remain involved. Sent a second letter with update about the research, how it was going, what I was doing. I wrote, like, I've been listening to the tapes, they're really interesting. I'm really trying to see what stories are emerging from what you've told me, if there are similarities, etc., etc. And did that in a I suppose, as child appropriate a way as I could. I kept a continuous involvement with the advisory group, and that was vital as well, because again, there was I suppose a difference in some of the things that the advisory group thought I needed to highlight from what I would have highlighted, etc., etc. And with each letter that I sent to each participant, I always ensured that I kind of put in that little reminder, we'll be getting together in a couple of months and I'd like if you were involved, etc., etc. So that was a thread throughout all of my engagement. The other thing, I suppose, because I was working with children and young people, I was very careful never to have any child's telephone number myself. I had their parents' telephone number. I was also very careful that the letters were sent to their home address with a letter enclosed for the child to give to their parent, again to keep the involvement of the children, but ensuring that parents were informed of everything that was happening as well. So all of the participants were invited to an initial research review day. 6 attended of as I said, 14 at that stage. And it turned out to be quite a magical day, really, because those 6 young people, I had done initial work with the advisory group. We had decided what to highlight. We had images of some of the findings up on the board. I introduced the Child and Family Research Centre, what it was. I introduced what a research project involves, what stage we were at this stage of it, etc., etc. So that the children and young people knew exactly what was happening. And then an update was sent to everybody who had participated in the thing, in the result, and again they were invited to have continuous involvement. And following on from that, I began to get more contact back from the children and young people, kind of saying how much they had valued the day, how they wanted to stay involved, and how they felt that it was important that I sent that report to everybody who had participated. Sorry, the other thing to mention as well, and this was something that the advisory group were very not insistent upon, but obviously we had some. I was provided with some funding from the Child and Family Research Centre to cover costs of transport for parents. So we were able to cover petrol costs if parents travelled a distance, and refreshments. And there was a decision made early on that we had to have pizza for lunch, and that continued right through, and it's kind of become almost like a little a joke with us all now. We actually, whenever we meet now, it has got to be pizza. And on one occasion, I did invite the children out for lunch, and they chose to go to Milano's so they could have pizza. So I've given up on anything else. Okay. And obviously as well, just to, in case I forget to say it, there was ongoing participation, ongoing consent from parents and children and young people for every stage of the process. You showed me a figure there, did you? Oh no. Okay. So the participation increased. Okay. And I'll just to say that these were what I focused on at those meetings, the initial findings, what it was like to participate in a research like this. That was a really important one, and how the findings should be disseminated. When asked about a dissemination project, there was no mention of academic conferences or peer-reviewed articles. I hate to tell you that, but that wasn't what the children and young people were. School magazines, meetings with peers, information sessions for parents, and social media. The use of social media was kind of way up there. And what emerged from what the children and young people wanted to get, and again it kind of shows where they were coming from. They weren't that interested in whether the Minister for Children heard what was happening for them. They weren't interested in the Family Mediation Service. They weren't interested in the Child and Family Research Centre. They wanted to get messages to their parents, to their friends, to their peers, and they wanted something in schools, particularly primary schools. And it kind of that decision about the primary schools was a very interesting one for me, because it was children who were kind of post-primary school who who had lived in a separated family, perhaps through primary school, and they said, well, other kids don't know what it's like, so the teacher needs to initiate things, and that ended up being one of the videos that they made. Okay. Once social media was mentioned, of course, we had to I suppose the dissemination project probably took on a different slant, really, because obviously we had to get another protocol in place with the Child and Family Research Centre through the Youth Researchers Project, and more kind of, I suppose, involvement of parents to ensure that they were okay with what we were going to do. It was carried out in conjunction with Feroige, the National Youth Education and Tech Space, and we worked through that with 3 creative youth workers up in the Feroige premises up in near the coach station, and for a period of 3 months during January, February, March, 4 months actually, March and April of last year, we met on Sundays, and the children wrote scripts, decided how they were going to get their messages across, and produced 2 very charming videos, which I don't have time to show to you today, but I'll make sure that the link is sent to you. And that was, and in February of this year, the Ombudsman for Children launched those videos here at the Child and Family Research Centre, and again that launch was planned and decided upon by the children and young people. One of the young women chaired the session. There was a panel discussion with the young people, and there are four young people have agreed to remain involved with me. We've got a school visit coming up in May, and we're hopefully going to present at the Empathy Conference here at NUI Galway, the 5 of us together, about that. The challenges, I suppose, was moving from the role of researcher to the role of facilitator. Ordering the right pizzas was important as well. There are times during that dissemination project where my adult-centric thinking was challenged, and where I kind of had to hold myself back from maybe perhaps trying to include things that I thought were important or that had come up from my findings rather than what the children and young people did. And I am so glad that I was able to zip it and not influence it in any way. It led to discussions as well around the age of consent for the participants, where the mid-teens young people felt that they shouldn't need to have parental consent in order to participate, and that led to a little bit of a change in how they presented things. And I suppose the question as well, I suppose from my point of view, is that should children and young people's views form parts of ethics committees, and I know that there's some deliberation about that later this afternoon, or should they be involved in ethics committees? Okay, so this is a final word from Marianne. Okay, and this was sent to me in an email following the completion of the dissemination projects. After my parents split up, I didn't feel there was anyone else going through the same thing or understood what I was feeling. I never thought when I was 10 years old my situation could be used to benefit other people. My voice was heard. I'm so grateful for that, and I have made some great friends through this project. And I think this is the most significant thing of all, and I've learned to appreciate the power of young people's minds. Margaret. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Anne, for that inspiring talk. We have time for a quick question or comment.
Thanks very much, Anne. Really interesting. And I think you started out with these people as participators, and then they moved on to being involved.
Yes.
Do you think your thinking around research has changed from that, in terms of starting other research studies?
Well, I suppose from the beginning, I had a hope that there would be an output. I'm a practitioner, and I'm a very practical person, and I've worked, I suppose, for a good number of years, and I could see the pitfalls for families of their voice not being heard, you know. So I was hoping that that this project would result in a poster that we could put up into family mediation offices that said some of the things that that was what I had hoped, you know. And I thought that all of that would kind of come at the end when I had everything done, and then I'd invite them back and see what was happening. But their need, I suppose, for their involvement in a different kind of a way came up from the bottom. It was like a pot that started to bubble, and their ideas kind of came up as a result of that. So to a large extent, there was no choice. I had to hand it over to them. I could no longer be the researcher and start influencing or asking questions or anything like that. There was no choice in the matter. It just became their project.
So again, thanks very much, Anne, and again, you'd be delighted, I'm sure, to take questions during coffee time. Thank you indeed. So we'll move on to our final component of this session, which is a double act.